SFBBO, promoting sustainability by engaging communities for more than 40 years. Our Birdie Hour speaker series is a free virtual program. On March 20th, 2025, certified California naturalist Karan Gathani gave the talk Beyond Birds, the Hidden World of Insects for our community.
I'm Karan Gathani. I have been on the board for almost 3 years now. I like to, in my spare time, I like to be out in like urban nature, trying to explore things, trying to be out of trouble. I don't have a Netflix subscription, so like I have to be creative and the way I keep myself engaged. And one of the things is actually flipping rocks, looking at birds, doing volunteering events and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff that I have learned when I ended up actually volunteering with different nonprofits. And like Bay Area has like amazing nonprofits. There's so much to learn and so much to see. So many experienced people you can actually meet and learn from. So highly recommend if you haven't gotten a chance to do that, so do that. But yeah, personally, I got involved with that and I started asking questions. So that curiosity led me to actually interact with other naturalists. And that's when I got my California Naturalist certification from Grassroots. And I've been trying to explore ever since. So for today's talk, my goal would be to actually explore or like show a side of insects that most people don't usually think of. We always think of insects as pests. And so my hope is when we actually go through that, maybe everyone in the room ends up walking away with something that they were not previously aware of. So I'll try to show some themes in birds and insects. So that said, let me share my screen and we'll take it from there. So let me get set up. Okay, cool. So that said, this is the topic Beyond Birds. So we'll be still talking about birds, but then also talking about a side of insects that most people don't actually think of. All right. So that said, one of the things, if you are involved with this organization, you might be a birder, or you might have some relation with birds or like restoration, habitat restoration or something. But birders is something you'll hear a lot. And whenever someone asks me how to explain what a birder is, I always explain it using this example. So if there are, how do you know if a group has birders? So you just say that, hey, look, there's a golden beaver out there. If you see those people actually take out their binoculars and cameras and try to photograph that bird, you know there are birder. Another trick to actually find out if there are birders is if you say that, hey, look, there's a soldier beetle out there, and they take out their pest spray and start spraying that beetle, yeah, that's a birder. So that's how you know those are birders. A typical birder's Christmas wish list is they want to see lifers. They want credit for the first sighting in any geographical region. They want to cross 20,000 eBird observation. That's like a typical, I think a lot of birders can relate with that. One of the things birders like to do is to participate in a big year, which is like spend a lot of money, travel around the world, spot and record as many bird species as possible. It is, again, it is fascinating to go through different countries and do that. It is also an expensive hobby. It's not a cheap. So people have done local, like in the state and stuff like that. But most people, if you want to set records, you have to travel around the world. That being said, this person, Ariane Dwarshuis, I guess he's Dutch, and he ended up setting the record in 2016, wherein he had more than half of the bird species in the world traveled to 41 countries, 6 continents, and his record is yet to be broken. So you might be thinking of breaking the record, but again, that was what it was. So when we hear of big year, we always associate it with birds. So why is it that we do not have a big year for insects? So it's a hard problem because with insects, the life cycles are really short and seasonal. So you might not have an insect that will stay the whole year round. Like it's really hard to find insects in winter and stuff like that. So it's something, so you're not able to actually look for insects in your year, right? Like it's an annual thing. The other thing is then insects, you can identify a lot of the common species just by observing, eyeing them. A lot of them actually need microscopic examination, which is takes a lot of time. So it's not as easy as like identifying something like a bird or something, which is still tricky. You need to develop that skill, but insect, you have to like take it, kill the insect, bring it in the lab or whatever, like if you want to actually identify it. There's not that many field guides. So birds actually have a lot of field guides. Insects, there's not that many. There are, but it's not that. And there's no comprehensive because you'll find out. And that's the reason is, so bird species, I said we have 11,000. Insect, you have like more than 5 million. So it's really hard. So anyone who's actually like just when you're pointing out insects and they are able to like casually tell you that is, they're mostly a snake oil salesman. Like a lot of them, you have to actually observe the wings and stuff like that. So before you can confidently actually say. So there's no widespread insecting culture, just like you have a birding culture. And like the reasons for that is exactly what I mentioned. But if you wanted to do a big year for insects and you wanted to like break the record for like the bird thing, you wouldn't even need to leave California because California itself has 30,000 species of insects. So that said, we will actually explore some key themes that are actually common across team insects and team birds. So irrespective of whichever team you fall in, we'll actually look at both themes today. So but before we do that, like people know what birds are, but let's actually find out, make sure everyone is on the same page, what insects are. So, what are the qualifications you need to join that insect club? And one of the things is you need to be an invertebrate, and an invertebrate is something that does not have a spine. So, anytime you ask an insect to actually stand up for a cause that it should be championing, and it said, I cannot, and you said, grow a spine, it would say I can't, and that's true. Like it cannot. They don't have spines. It needs to have a three-part body, so you have head, thorax, and abdomen. So in this example, I've shown you the three parts. They need to have 6 legs. Also, they'll often have wings. It's not the case with all insects, but most of them will have wings. So what happened around 400 million years ago, the insects did not have wings, and they actually came up with like, there's an ingenious insect that actually said, hey, like did some mathematical equations, came up with designs of like, what if we actually come up with some wings? And that way we will be able to actually like go to conquer areas that we wouldn't have. We'll be able to exploit resources that we wouldn't be able to. And so what ended up happening is they come up with a wing design, but at that time, in their hindsight, they forget to patent that design. So what ends up happening after that is 160 million years ago, there's a bird that comes, secretly copies that design, and actually leaves the lab. And then at a conference, actually goes and announces something as bird wings. And again, like I said, I love the story of how birds copied insect wings because insect wings were 400 million years ago. Birds were much more recent. But unfortunately, that's not true. It's just a case of convergent evolution when different species evolved to have similar adaptations for similar kind of challenges they face in nature. So in this case, if you have a housefly, if you have a gull, both of them learn to fly without each of them training each other. So like they both of them ended up getting their pilot's license. So that's convergent evolution, which like they did not share how they did it, but they ended up actually both end up learning to fly. All right, so if you have never got a chance to look at insect wings, this is one of the examples of it. So when you look at insect wings, you'll see a lot of veins actually in the insect. And this is actually really important when you are doing identification. The venation pattern is something you would use to actually do it. So like I said, if an insect is flying and if you're trying to do your big ear or whatever, it's really hard because you can't get a idea of the veins when something is flying. So um, these veins are actually initially when they actually have their wings, they finish their molting, become an adult, they'll have to pump blood through it to actually inflate their wings before they're able to fly. And then these veins also provide some structure to help them actually fly. So let's talk a little bit about insect wings. So insect wings are not like they are forelimbs or anything. It's just an extension of the exoskeleton. So insects are like carrying armors, and they are actually walking around with that. But this is an extension, so it's not a limb or appendage that ended up becoming a wing. So it's a separate body part. One of the things that they do is they use asynchronous flight muscles, and this is really important. Asynchronous flight muscles, I'll cover about that. They're only present in adults, and they hold the record for the fastest wing beat, which is like 1,000 times a second. Like think for it for a second, 1,000 flaps already. So this is the midge that actually ends up doing it. So this is what insect wings, and I'll cover the same for how it looks in birds. But before we look at bird wings, one thing we can collectively agree is bird wings are delicious. But other than that, if you have never got a chance to look at bird wings, you can see this bird flapping its wings. Is bird wings are modified forelimbs. So instead of your hands, they end up developing into wings. So they use synchronous flight muscles. Like I said, insects for asynchronous. This is synchronous. I'll cover more about this. They are present in juvenile and adult both. And their top wing beat rate is 200 beats per second, which is a hummingbird, a ruby-throated one. Okay, so that's the difference. So let's look at what's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous flight muscles, because that's like a completely different thing that you have to understand. But before that, let's look at how muscles work in humans. So if I was sitting in my chair and I wanted to pick my nose or scratch my face, my brain has to send a nerve impulse, which is like an electrical signal, so I can actually go and do something. And then it's a 1:1 relationship. So every time there's a nerve impulse, I'll actually do it, and then my muscles will relax. And so if I send the nerve impulse again, it'll contract, and then they'll relax. And so the challenge with that is you can only do so much, because the nerves, when they like fire the impulses, there's this wait time before they can fire again. So birds use something similar. So every nerve impulse that gets fired, an equal amount has to actually, like, there's a wing flap. And so there is a limit, because like I said, there's a rest period before it can actually fire again. That's not true with insects. Insects are asynchronous, which means every nerve impulse that actually goes in a way, it ends up flapping the wings for longer, because you don't need successive nerve impulses to keep on sustaining that motion. So think of it like a swing or a rubber band. Like when you actually do it, it'll retain the elasticity and it'll keep on flapping. So the muscles in insects will deform the thorax, and that will actually contract the other muscles, which will end up sustaining the wing flap. So you don't really need the nerve impulses 1:1 kind of. And this is like a radical change, because that allows them to actually flap at really high frequencies that birds cannot. Again, it's like synchronous versus asynchronous. Okay, that said, let's cover bird migrations. So most people are aware bird migrations happen when the birds are not going to want to spend winter at a place if there's not enough food and stuff like that. Like you'll see migrations happening. A lot of people who will be like, I'm going to Florida, I can't sustain the cold. Same thing. That's what birds do. Just the birds don't have a cottage or another place to actually stay, a cabin to stay in. Okay, cool. So one of the key things when we talk about migrations is bird migration is single generation. This is like a really, and I have highlighted so that people understand. So it's single generation. So which means the bird that is actually going in, when it comes back, it can share the stories that what it end up seeing and stuff like that. So it's a single generation, which is the same individual will go and it'll come back. It is triggered by hormonal changes, and that is triggered by like changing day length. You will see birds flying in V shape, and that is to actually conserve energy. Different birds will end up actually going in front of the line to make sure they are not the one that is actually facing the headwind. And then other, like again, everyone has to play a role and stuff like that. So that's bird migration. Insect migration is pretty different, because insect migration is not a single generation, it is multi-generation. And this is the different concept, like for folks to understand, like, yes, insects migrate. It's not the same individual that will come back. So if you started having feelings for one insect that is about to go, you might not see that insect back. You would surely not see that insect. Like me put it, like I know it sounds brutal, but that's the way it is. It is triggered by temperature and food availability. uh, and a lot of migrating insects, it doesn't happen a lot, but a lot of migrating insects will actually rely on their fat reserves and favorable winds, especially like dragonflies. They'll do when they have to cross oceans. So in this case, I have example of our monarch migration. So people always think like that's the poster child of like conservation for insects. Um, and when you think of a monarch migration, so it happens in separate generations. So something that when you think of monarch migration that happens in like the Bay Area or whatever, you'll think of Santa Cruz. And so if you see the monarchs that are like the eggs are they hatch, this is the generation that will actually end up flying from over here to Nevada or something. And then they'll actually mate and lay eggs, and then they'll die. So the second generation will hatch and they'll go and they'll end up crossing like border or getting close to Utah or something. And then they'll die. The same thing, they'll find mates, lay eggs and stuff like that. And then the fourth generation, which is the longest lasting one, they'll live for 6 months when they'll make the treacherous journey all the way to Santa Cruz. They will actually overwinter, lay their eggs, and then die. So just to put it in perspective, if there was something, there's a kid that I actually was talking to monarch butterfly, like asking it to pick up a souvenir on its way back, and it actually holds the monarch butterfly. It's like, where's my souvenir? Like the monarch butterfly does not even know this kid, like it's because this is a new individual altogether. So, like I said, the concept of multi-generational, like something, hope people understand. It's like a different concepts, not the same thing. So they do migrate, but it's like a different individual altogether. Let's look at molting in birds. So molting, wherein you actually shed off like a part of your body for some purpose. So in this case, bird molting is pretty gradual. When they'll actually take off like some feathers and replace them, they'll use it for replacing damaged feathers. A lot of have breeding plumage, non-breeding plumage. They'll have age related when the young juveniles look different from the adults. So that's something that'll happen. They will keep on molting throughout their life. Again, all of these are concepts that are like completely different on insects. So make sure, I know most people will be aware, especially if you're aware of like bird watching and stuff like that. This is something that happens. Molting in insects is different because insects actually carry, their body is like carrying a huge armor that they're walking around with. It's like a super heavy one, but it provides a lot of protection. So their molting is discontinuous, wherein they don't actually shed individual parts. They have to shed the whole thing at once. So whenever they think that it's getting too tight or they are growing too big, they will actually start growing a new layer underneath the existing layer. And then they'll actually tear that older layer open and then they'll walk out. So in this case, I show how the insect will end up walking out. And that's a thing. And so once they walk out, they are pretty vulnerable because it will take a while before it will solidify. So that's another thing that people have to consider with insects. So usually when they finish molting, they'll be really pale in color. So most people, I get a lot of people who say that I saw, you know what I saw? I saw a white cockroach. And a white cockroach is just a cockroach that finished molting and then it will take them like under 24 hours before they can actually get their colors back. So again, I know it feels like you found a unicorn, but white cockroaches are pretty common. They, like I said, they don't want to be seen, so they'll actually hide. The white cockroaches you see are like, they're not good at their job, is what I'm saying. Okay, so insects will use that for growth. They'll do it for repair as well. They'll do for metamorphosis. When a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, they'll end up eating their way out and stuff like that. And molting in insects is actually limited. So you can only molt till you become an adult. So once you become an adult, you stop molting. Again, new concept for a lot of people. Molting only happens when you are a juvenile. It stops after you become an adult. So But the cool thing is, um, if a limb is damaged before you become an adult, how do you know this is a juvenile? Because it's wearing Converse sneakers. So that's how you know this is a juvenile. And in this case, if you end up actually clipping the legs of one of the grasshoppers, if because it still hasn't become an adult, when it actually molts, like maybe the final molt or the successive molts before it becomes an adult, it will regrow its limbs. So that's a like a new concept, and now it's wearing dress shoes, so you know it's an adult. Also has a driving license. So, and it will develop wings at the same time. So that's another thing because they don't feel juveniles should be flying, just like we don't think juveniles should be drinking alcohol. That's the same thing that they will only allow when they end up becoming an adult. So that's one thing. Now we'll cover respiration, which is another topic that is like completely different on how it works with like birds or mammals as well as insects. So respiration in humans, so we have lungs, we breathe in, we breathe out. It is like good, it works. It's not the most efficient. It's like it's not super efficient. The reason for that is because when you're breathing in or breathing out, you can only do one thing at a time. So for an example, I have a bathtub and assume you have 50 people who have to take a shower, but everyone has to use the same bathtub. So the first person will come in, they'll take a bath in the bathtub and then drain the water. Second person fills up water, takes a shower, drains the water. So like you have a lot of people waiting in line to do that. And that's essentially what human respiration is. It's not super efficient. It works for our case because we just what do we need it for? Watching TikTok and like sitting in our cars. So we don't really need that to be that efficient. Birds need to be efficient in their respiration. So bird respiration is pretty different because they use something called as air sacs, which are just like different chambers that allow you to store extra air. And unlike humans, wherein like the same way you go in is the same way you come out in the air, birds is not that. Birds is a one-way street wherein you go one way, but you come out the other way. So you never go in the same direction. So whenever they actually inhale, it gets stored in like a chamber called like an air sac. This is the posterior air sac. And then it actually flows to the lungs, and the lungs is what will actually end up pumping it. And so over here, I show that the slide actually has a continuous supply of water. So even when it's actually, oops, even when it's exhaling, there is still water or air. Like in this example, water it is still in the chamber in the air sac, right? Like so, it will always be able to provide water. So you can have so many people take showers. So in this case, it will constantly be able to pump oxygen to all its muscles, which will need because they are like continuously flapping their wings for. And then all the dirty water is being carried to the other air sac or carbon dioxide in this case and being pumped all the way out. So, like I said, even when they are exhaling or inhaling, there's always going to be a supply of oxygen. So, they're never going to be oxygen starved because their muscles need it when they're doing a lot of activity already. Uh, okay. So, respiration in insects is pretty different because it's not as active. There's no concept of lungs in insects. There's no centralized thing that is pumping oxygen. It's pretty decentralized. And so the case, the way you would see it is if you ever see an insect up close, you'll see tiny holes that are on the side. Those are not bullet wounds. The insect did not get shot. Those are spiracles, which is where they actually breathe from. So in this case, I use an example of a water sprinkler to show how air is being or water is being actually delivered to the plants. So think of the plants as cells. So, but this is not like it's not pumping water. It's like just water that gradually makes its way all the way to these to the sprinkler and then ends up giving it to the cell. It's not actively pumping it. So that's a different concept. Like so, spiracles is what you see over here, and then all the air goes in, does that, the carbon dioxide passively like diffuses outside kind of. So there's no active pumping going on, but the oxygen is delivered directly to the cells. There's no lungs that are actually delivering that oxygen. So uh, so this brings to the question of why insects don't get huge. This is another question I get a lot. And insects will passively diffuse oxygen. They are not pumping it. It's not actively. So it's pretty passive. One of the challenges with having oxygen being pumped that passively is if you end up growing bigger, your volume increases much faster than your surface area. And this is a challenge. And I'll actually use some math. I know a lot of people are allergic to math, just like how they are to pollen. But trust me, you would want to learn this if you want to actually be more curious or you want to understand some concepts in biology. So there's some math. Try to keep it as simple as possible. But there's a concept of surface area and there's a concept of volume. So surface area is like the amount of paint you would need to paint the sides of the cube, and the volume would be how much paint can you fill within the cube, kind of. So in this case, so this is the formula. You don't need to remember formula. There's no pop quiz, so rest assured, you don't need to worry about it. But the case is, this is just an example to teach people, is if the length is 1, if the surface area you can see, it's like calculate the formula. So the ratio of surface area to volume is 6:1 when it's the size is 1 centimeter for the cube. As we keep on increasing, so as we think if the insect is growing bigger or larger and larger, you will see that volume is now actually exceeding the surface area. So think of it, it's like a house that has tiny windows. How are you going to get that ventilation within it if you do not have an air conditioning? And that is what actually causes a challenge for them to get enough oxygen, because like I said, the spiracles end up with the trachea connecting to the individual cells. So you do not have the spiracles that are large enough that can actually passively diffuse oxygen. So if they had something like a lung, it would be better, but they do not. And that unfortunately means we won't have large insects. There is a way you can make them larger if you increase the amount of oxygen in our atmosphere. So right now we have it about 21%. You can increase it to 45. You'll start a lot of wildfires. I wouldn't recommend you to do it. But if you wanted to see big insects, large insects, this would be one of the way. They'll still have other challenges with their heavy armor and stuff like that, but this would be another way. So in that case, if we ever ended up, if there was a show called Game of Thrones that is made when insects are that large, when you have oxygen level of 45%, she won't be called the mother dragon. She would be called the mother of dragonflies then, because the dragonflies would be huge. Okay. All right. That said, let's look at communication in birds. So how do birds communicate? So birds will use auditory communication. They'll use bird songs. They'll use bird calls. That's the way they'll communicate, try to attract mates, communicate with their peers, do warning signs. They'll do visual communication, wherein the bird of paradise will do courtship dance. They'll like do a bunch of different funny stuff, which is like pretty photogenic, but they'll do that for attracting mates or advertising their, like marking their territory or like defending their territory or whatever. So that's communication in birds. And this is like the primary way they will communicate. Insects is different because most of the more dominant mode of communication in insects is actually pheromones, which is like chemical. So it's like chemical, it's like almost like a perfume kind scent that they will release. So in this case, I show a fly actually just spraying the pheromone, which is what the male flies are attracted to. There's even one that is actually swiping right because of the scent. So the other one is auditory. So if you have ever heard on a warm summer evening, you'll hear grasshoppers, crickets, or especially crickets. You'll hear them actually make sounds. Stridulation, which is when they are rubbing their organs against each other to actually make sounds. So that's another way they'll communicate. There's visual communication as well. So you'll see fireflies that'll actually bioluminescence and to actually communicate with potential mates. So that's like the communication that you have in insects. But like I said, chemical is the more dominant ones, with a lot of insects that they'll use to attract mates. They'll use to actually communicate with other like peers as well, especially in social insects. So this is an ant story that you will understand, that will make you see how dominant a chemical communication is in an ant or a lot of insects as well. But I'll show an example of an ant. So let's say there's an ant and the ant dies. I don't know the reason. We don't need to start a homicide investigation, it just dies. So And then what ends up happening is when it passes, you might have a worker ant that passes. It won't actually pick it out and like clean it. It'll just walk past it, and then it'll actually wait for the ant to actually decompose for a bit. So it can be like a day or two. It can be faster as well. It's based on the temperature. So it'll start breaking down, and oleic acid is the scent that the other ant has to actually detect before it knows that this ant has died. And then it'll actually pick it up and then throw it in the graveyard or the trash pile or whatever. So I see I have shown some soda cans and stuff like that. So the ants are recycling as well. But anyway, so they will actually dump it because they don't want the dead ants in their colony, which means it'll just cause like a lot of fungus and bacteria or whatever to grow. Also attract predators who might be looking for food. So this is the case that happens. So the ant, again, the ant can actually, they don't have good eyesight, but they won't be able to tell if it's a dead or not. So they'll wait for the chemical cues before they can actually pick it up and throw it. And so when the researchers ended up finding out, what they did is for that a live ant that was walking around, they ended up painting it with oleic acid. And what ended up happening after that is the ant would just walk around thinking there was nothing, but the workers actually thought it was the dead ant that was walking. So it would actually end up picking it up and throwing it in the pile because that's how they have been programmed. They just rely on chemical sense. Even though the ant is moving, they're like, this is what I've been trained to do. This is what I'll do, kind of. And so this is, like I said, this is the chemical thing. Let's look at parenting in birds, which is birds are really good at parenting. They're pretty dedicated parents. They'll have few number of offspring, so they'll be able to give a lot of parental care to their offspring. The males and females will sometimes it's just the females. They have a high survival rate because they have a lot of tender, loving care that the parents are giving to the kids. They will teach them. They'll protect the young. And the eggs will need incubation as well. So again, that's something that will happen. And since there's like a high survival rate, few number of offspring, I show a girl that has bought life insurance for the family security. But in case of insects, is pretty different. That's a concept that I feel is hard because they actually have a lot of offspring. So the reason why they have a lot of offspring is because there's really low survival rate. Very few ended up actually surviving and becoming adults. So they'll actually lay 200, 500 eggs, but then very few will end up actually surviving. Most parents, when they lay their eggs, especially in solitary insects, no one is taking care of it. The eggs and the babies are by themselves. They have to find their first food. They have to deal with the world. No one is training them. No one is protecting them. These eggs don't need incubation. They might lay it on the leaf. They might lay it in the soil, and the eggs are by themselves. And I'll show that they're only for solitary. So in this case, insurance is a scam, is what the lady beetle says, because like, why does it need? Like, there's so many of them not surviving. Um, but that said, there are exceptional parenting cases in solitary insects wherein you will have earwig, which is a type of insect, which people call it pincher bug. They will actually take care of the eggs, the mothers, not the fathers. The fathers are out of the equations. But the mothers will actually clean it, lick it to make sure there are no fungal spores on the eggs, keep it clean, and they'll also guard the babies after they have hatched for a while before the babies leave the nest for good. I mean, it's not a nest, it's just uh, they have it in the soil or under rocks or whatever. But you'll see her guarding. So anytime you actually see it, you'll see her like cleaning around, or she can even move the eggs if she feels like this is a threat. Um, and then there is another one called giant. The people call it toe biter or something, but it's also giant water bug. And there's a specific family when the males will actually um, carry the eggs. So the females, once they mate, the females will lay the eggs on the back of the male, and she'll use like an adhesive kind of glue to have the egg stick to it. And the males will actually walk around with the eggs, and they'll protect it as well. So they'll actually make sure they'll uh, have it like paddle, use their legs as paddle, and like have fresh water to oxygenate the eggs, and they'll protect it from being consumed by like other aquatic invertebrates and stuff like that. So they'll do that. Once the eggs hatch, they'll be on their own. But this is the way that you'll see in some. But again, this is like few cases when there's exceptional parenting in solitary insects. Most of them lay their eggs and then the babies are on their own, kind of. It's not because their career or something is more important. It's just like their life cycle ends. Like most insects, once they lay their eggs, they'll end up dying. But exceptional parenting is the norm in social insects when like the siblings, which are mostly the sisters, not the parents, raise the brood. So if you think of social insects, think of ants. So in this case, it's the worker ants that will end up caring for the babies. The queen is just laying eggs. That's it. The workers, her daughters, and or the sisters of this one are taking care of the babies. Same thing with honeybees as well. The queen is not taking care of the babies. So she's not going to get a Mother of the Year or like a Mother's Day card or Mother Day flower because she, except of laying eggs, she doesn't do anything. So again, comes as a surprise when we think of like a queen in a colony. Her job is just to lay eggs. She does not help with the kid or whatever. Okay, cool. Uh, all right, so let's look at the theme of bird as pollinators. So when people think of, I mean, you ask a lot of birders like, hey, do you think birds pollinate? The one of the things, de facto at least, in North and South America would be hummingbirds. One of the flowers that hummingbirds are really good at pollinating are the flowers that most people have in their backyards. It's really good at pollinating those flowers. You'll see them a lot coming to the backyards. But bird at pollinators, it's a small group that ends up doing it. So it's usually hummingbirds and like a lot of uh, the birds that will actually consume nectar. You'll see them, and they have like so. Hummingbirds are mostly north south. Believe sunbirds might be Africa or Asia. Honey eater might be Australia, and I think honey creeper are Hawaii. But it's like if you look at it, it's mostly tropical regions. We still have it over here, but it's mostly related to tropical. And there's few, like really few, like a family of birds that end up doing it. They have specific preferences for what kind of flowers they can. It's usually tubular or bell shaped that they'll actually pollinate. Has to be a specific color. They're pretty picky on what they will end up doing. Like I said, mostly tropical. They will unintentionally transfer pollen that gets stuck to their heads or beaks or whatever, and they're average at best. They're not that great of pollinators. So insects as pollinators, this is a career for insects. So you'll see a lot of family or diversity in insects that actually do pollination. Really wide variety of flowers that have adapted to worldwide distribution. Bees will actively collect pollen. Like this is an actively, you'll see it like actually using collecting pollen, putting in their pollen basket or pollen sac. They're really good at efficient at pollinators. So, all right, let's look at a topic that most people don't think of, but decomposing is a service that birds provide in nature as well. So if you think of like the chip or snack you do not want to eat and you give it to the gulls, they are doing their job as decomposers. So, if you think like the de facto answer when you think of decomposer, you'll think of scavengers, like vultures that will end up eating dead carrion or like dead animals or whatever. So it's mostly vultures. You'll have some raptors who will forage on carrion as well. Gulls and crows will scavenge at landfills as well. So let's look at insects are decomposers. So the one of the things that's like you cannot like skip it is maggots. That's like the best decomposer that we have. I mean, there's a lot of best ones, but this is like one of the ones that people will think of. Dung beetles are another example that are really good at their job, and they are doing a job no one wants to do. No one wants to deal with that. So they are doing a service that they don't get thanked for enough. And so I would be remiss if I did not mention the valuable services dung beetles provide. Okay, so I'll quickly cover. So maggots, like I said, are important decomposers for animal carcasses. They are the first ones to colonize a dead body. So usually they'll be used for forensic investigations. They'll feed on ants will feed on different things. Termites will break down dead, decaying wood. It helps with nutrient recycling. Dung beetles, like I said, will roll balls of egg, lay their eggs inside them. There are different kind of beetles as well, and these ones museums will use them to actually clean out all the skeletons. So they'll eat all the other body part, like all the remains, and then make sure that it's just the bones that are left and stuff like that. So this is a really interesting story that will actually tell you the value of dung beetles. So this is Australia. If you do not know, this is the continent of Australia. So Australia has a lot of mammals that are marsupials, which means something that has a pouch. So think of like a kangaroo, a wombat, and stuff like that. And so their poop is dry and pellet-like. And so Australia had dung beetles that were able to actually like utilize or break down that kind of poop. But then when Australia got colonized by the Britain, they ended up bringing cattle. And the cattle, if you have ever seen cattle poop, it's not dry at all. It's like wet, sloppy, like a large pile. And when that happened, the existing beetle were like, I can't deal with this. That's not what I was evolved to actually break down. And so what ended up happening is there were piles and piles of cow poop that was lying around. And then that ended up causing an infestation of flies. And so scientists ended up figuring out what to deal with this. They ended up releasing dung beetles that had evolved to actually break down cow poop. And then they ended up releasing them in Australia, different species. And now they were able to get back to work, reduce the fly population, and then you had like grasses green again because the nutrients were being recycled, and you had happy cows as well. Okay, cool. I'll quickly go over the roles. Like I said, birds are prey and predator. They control insect populations. They help with like spreading the seed. You have birds that will eat the bird guano is really important for nutrients. Humans used to use that before we ended up discovering synthetic fertilizers. Woodpeckers are really valuable. They'll create cavities that are used for a lot of different insects. And I have like some pictures showing different things that birds are eating insects. And this is a bird pooping. You have them doing pest control. You have them eating fruits and spreading the seed. Okay, so roles insects play. Again, they are major source for birds. Uh, this is another one that is like they have specialized. This is a career move for insects, which they are wasps that are parasitic. Like it's like complete. It's not a brood parasites when they actually lay eggs in the same thing, but they will actually. And I'll explain it in the next slide what that means. And ants and termites, like I said, play a valuable role to break down, aerate the soil because they'll make those tunnels, help have oxygen go down the soil. Dominant pollinators of plants, really essential decomposers. Like I said, we live in a society where we give a lot of effort, emphasis on pollination. We do not thank the decomposers enough, which I think is equally as valuable. Okay, so life of parasitic wasp. This is something I had captured. Um, so there are these things called as aphids, and then they actually grow pretty big in numbers. People actually hate when they see it on their plant. But then there are wasps that are parasites. So what they'll do is, in this case, I saw a wasp, which is called mummy wasp. When they'll actually lay their egg, um, inside the aphid. So I try to see it actually injecting. So over here, you can see it actually injecting an egg inside the aphid. So you'll see the ovipositor that it's actually injecting its egg within it. And so when the egg hatches, it'll start eating the aphid from inside. So you can see. So these are like parasitoids. And that's like there's a huge, like a lot of different species of wasps that actually end up doing that. So again, they have like specialization that they have evolved, and they cannot like just like if you take out the aphid, they'll be able to like parasitize any other thing. Like they have evolved. So this is a really specialized one. This is something like you won't see in a lot of birds. I know birds do brood parasitism; they lay their eggs and other, but this is like a completely different ballgame. Okay, cool. I do want to make sure we finish on time as well. So SFBBO does invertebrate surveys. So like I said, we do a lot of habitat restoration. So we do survey our areas to see if we have the invertebrate diversity increase before, after. So we'll do that. We have done 7 surveys till now. We've discovered a bunch of different things. We are hoping to actually explore more, do pollinator surveys, see how our native plants are actually helping attract different pollinators and stuff like that. So this is an exciting project that we have been starting. We have piloted in our habitat restoration area. So, and finally, if you are excited to see more insects up close, there's a bunch of different resources. So there's iNaturalist you can use to identify, hey, what kind of cockroach or what kind of stink bug I have. You can use that. This bug guide as well, which is another good resource. Insect identification, if you just want to know what shape, sizes. Um, there's a BioBlitz club. This is a club in Bay Area. I mean, it's not technically a club. You don't need membership, but it's run by Marav, who's a really fantastic entomologist that actually organizes BioBlitzes. So BioBlitzes are events, like a 2-hour events. They're free for everyone. You just need to register. You come, and then you'll be paired with a docent, and you'll take people out for walks and then show them, like in like urban areas, you'll show them different plants, birds, animal, insects, and stuff like that. So you'll get to learn a lot. And if you think you have something that you can teach your skills to people who will attend them, you can become a docent as well. So just check bioblitz.club website. You'll be able to see that. Thank you so much. I know there was a lot of things I had to cover, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have.
Thank you, Karan. That was really interesting and also entertaining, entertaining as well. We did have, and so if people have questions, I know that there was a lot of information to digest, but you might have had some questions come up for you as Karan was sharing. So please go ahead and put those in the chat. We did have someone ask way back, I think in the beginning when you were describing what the definition of insects, someone wrote, some non-insects like ticks have 6 legs at certain life stages. No, and maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a really good observation. So ticks are arachnids, but yeah, they will eventually end up getting 8 legs. So that disqualifies them from being an insect. Like you can, but yeah, it's something that they will have when they are growing. They'll go through 3 different stages. And for the first one, they'll have 6, and then they'll end up getting 8 and 8. Um, but essentially, you will, again, there are a lot of things you can use. It's even an insect, not all insects will have wings, but again, arachnids will, you'll be able to count by their legs, which is they ended up having 8 legs, which means if you have an insect, or if you have a spider and you clip 2 legs, that does not make it an insect. Like it is still had 8 legs. So you cannot cheat your way around it. But yeah, there's different things you can look at it. But yeah, 6 legs, and there's a lot of different things. You have to look at their mouth parts. You have to look at their wings as well. But that's a good observation.
Great, thank you. Sandra asks, how is climate change affecting insects?
I think climate change is affecting a lot of different things. One of the things that it is affecting is it is making it harder for specialists. So it's climate change, like when we think of like climate change, it is like terrible. It's causing an extinction for a lot of, yes, it is causing an extinction or like a drop in numbers for a lot of things that are specialist. So something that have like specialized, like they can just do this flower. So if that flower disappears, they cannot end up getting they cannot pollinate that or something like that. But if that's generalist, they are thriving. And so climate change, I have seen that it is affecting the specialist when there's a certain kind of environment or certain kind of other insect that it has actually ended up. So if there's a species that ends up going extinct, like I said, like I showed you the example of the wasp thing. And the wasp can only do it an aphid. So if that aphid goes extinct, this wasp will crash. And that's something that is actually eating this wasp will crash as well. So a lot of things that we are actually trying to understand as well. But climate change is also changing like how early the flowers are flowering, or like just different changes of phenology. And that will, I think insects are adapting according to that. So again, there's a lot of things that might be happening, but definitely they are seeing change in their patterns as well when they start migrating, and their numbers are like dropping. The monarch butterfly, if you have seen, they are getting affected by different things as well. But again, it's such a long-term thing. It's not something we'll be able to solve in like just 1 year or something. But definitely the same impacts that birds are having, you'll start seeing those also. If there's birds that are not surviving with climate change, they are not keeping the insects under check. So you might see those numbers increasing. And yeah.
That's a good point. Thank you. That was interesting. Jeff asks, can insects regenerate body parts like some amphibians?
So just certain insects can, and it's mostly limbs. You cannot cut a head and assume it will grow again. But usually limbs, like I know stick insects, um, grasshoppers, crickets, they are really good at doing it. Again, that's the thing. When they regenerate it, it might be slightly smaller or slightly deformed, but they can grow it. But it's based on which body part it has. You have like clipped it on. I don't recommend people to start going out and clipping insect legs or whatever. But this is what happens. Amphibian is pretty different in how they do it. But insect, like I said, it's usually with like their limbs. That is the way I've seen that works the best.
Thank you. Emily asks, are there serious issues with the use of pesticides in agriculture?
Yeah, I do think there are. I think people are aware of using the synthetic pesticides that people are using, and that ended up causing the insects to die, causing a drop off. So, like I said, I think there's a lot more awareness right now. So we have been finding it is affecting them, the neonicotinoids. Um, and the current research does say that it is affecting them right now. So, like, I think we have to use cleaner or greener versions of what we have been using. Um, mm.
Great, thank you. Marianne asks, name some of the herbivorous insects that birds eat.
I have seen insects, birds eating. So again, like when you think of insects, birds, you'll see birds when they are actually feeding uh, protein to their babies, they will end up picking up caterpillars of butterflies. And that's something the caterpillars are feeding on the plants. So they are like in a way herbivorous. So any caterpillar that is like eating your plants or something, that is like food for the insects. This is like really nice protein for its baby. So that is like a valid protein that it could feed.
Great, thank you. Yvette says, weren't there very large insects during prehistoric times, during the time of the dinosaurs? How did they breathe with such large bodies? And also, what helped insects survive mass extinctions like birds did?
So so at that point, the oxygen level was 35%. They were not that huge though. They were like, I would say they had a wingspan of 2 feet. They were like mostly dragonflies kind of things. One of the things that they had it was mostly just the high density of oxygen, or like the high concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere, that helped it. But there's a limit to how much you can do it. So again, they were not like huge. They were not like dragons. I showed it in my thing. They were not that big, but they were like a small bunny kind of stuff. But yeah, it was just the oxygen. But then if there was more oxygen, they would still be limited in how heavy of an armor they can carry around. So they would still be limited in that respect, though.
Thank you. Nina asks questions a little more about your presentation. What did you use to make your presentation graphics and transitions? And what did you use to film the wasp laying in its egg in the aphid for your presentation slide earlier?
Oh yeah, so I'll answer that. Before I forget, I forgot to answer the second part, which was like, how did they survive the mass extinction? So yeah, the big ones, insects are really tiny, which means even the mammals that ended up surviving were the small, like rodent size ones. Insects, they are tiny, help survive. They are pretty generalist. Like if you think of cockroaches and so, they can like sneak into crevices and stuff like that. So they are not super demanded in their metabolism, so they don't need to eat a lot. Kind of, they'll survive for like abundant drought times and stuff like that. So they have adaptation that help them survive really well in those times, as well as in your homes as well. And so that ended up helping them survive, because like if you think of like birds survived, insects are even smaller, so they can even like hide, and some of them go under soil, so that helps them even better. So okay, and then to answer the second questions, I used Canva for making the presentation. So Canva is online platform. You can create a free account and make that. So I use that for creating all the images I used are all from Canva. Except the Game of Thrones ones. That's the only one I used from the net. And then yeah, I used a stereo microscope that I use in my bioblitzes. So I just put a phone on top of it to actually capture what is happening. But the wasp, when you saw the video, it wasn't affected by me getting close, because I had a hard time trying to focus and stuff like that. And the aphids don't bother when you use a microscope on them, but the wasp was like so involved in actually laying the eggs, so it wasn't freaked out as well.
Thank you. And I think we have these final two questions to wrap up. One is, what inspired your interest in insects? And the last is, what is your favorite insect?
I that's the thing. I don't have like a single favorite insect. I do like ants and wasps. I do think there's like a lot of things that I have yet to uncover, and there's like so much like a species is so different from the same ant species, or a wasp species is so much different, and trying to find out how are they parasitizing and stuff. There's just so much to see, so much to do, so much to learn. So I would say those two. But like I said, I love my stink bugs. I love my cockroaches. I can talk about them all day, night long. And then I think in terms of just what is, I feel insects in a way are, when we talk about like when we want to make nature accessible to everyone, I feel insects are a really good way of making accessible to a lot of people. I know plants are like the most accessible, but the plants are not like super like they're not responding to what you are doing. Like I mean, yes, if you nurture them well, if you give them enough water, they'll see beautiful wildflowers. They're not responding to what you do. With insects, I feel they are like tiny animals. So think of it like an elephant, but now I like shrink it into like 10 times smaller or whatever. And then that's what insects are. So I feel, and they are everywhere. You don't even need to leave your homes to actually interact with one. So I feel they are like so much more accessible for anyone who's curious about things in nature. And essentially, that's what I ended up helping me actually explore more and ask more questions.
Wonderful. Well, Karan, you have so many comments in the comments section thanking you for a fantastic presentation, mind-blowing presentation. People really learned a lot. So thanks so much for putting this together for SFBBO and for everything that you do for our organization in your capacity as a board member and a volunteer. Thanks, everybody.
SFBBO is a nonprofit. With your support, we will continue to inform decision makers, inspire people to act, and involve diverse communities in our work. Please visit our website to learn more and get involved today.